All right, so we'll go ahead and go to the Pledge of Allegiance.
Can everyone on the line hear okay? We're kind of kicking off here? Okay.
Yes. All right. To the flag.
For which it stands, one nation, under God,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay. Call to order. Go ahead and do a roll call.
Okay.
Ashley,
Hello?
are you on the line?
Yes, I'm on the line. Can you hear me?
Yeah, can you do a roll call for us?
Sure.
And I would ask anybody that's also on the line, if you're not speaking, if you could mute your phone. We're just getting a lot of feedback on our end. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, Adrian Trevino?
Present.
Okay. George Narvaez?
Present.
Omar Gonzalez Longoria? Omar Gonzalez Longoria?
He's on the line, so he's present.
Yeah, he's here. Okay. Jose Angel Lopez? Arturo Tomas Benavides?
I am present in attendance by phone.
Okay. Elizabeth Alonso Villarreal?
Present.
Robert Jude Gilpin?
Present by phone.
Jose D. Gonzalez?
Present.
And Hector Cortez. Okay. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 present. We have a quorum.
All right. I believe the minutes were emailed out, right?
Yes.
Everybody want to take a minute to review them, and then once they're reviewed, make a motion, and we'll have discussion.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, this is Ashley. We need a motion for the
I'm
absence.
sorry. You're right. I'd like to make a motion, first of all, for to have the absences excused, yeah? Motion.
I make a motion. I make a motion. This is Adrian.
Okay. This motion is for what, I'm sorry?
Excuse of the absences that weren't able to participate in the meeting today. The roll call.
I second.
George? Okay. There's no discussion on this, so we all vote in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Everybody?
Aye.
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 And just for a moment of clarity, we have Ashley's in the back room over here taking all the notes and everything. So she's here, she's just in the other room. So just, we're good there with.
Thanks, Ashley.
You're welcome.
Okay, I guess we'll move forward with the minutes now.
Mr. Chairman, I had a chance to review them while I was waiting, and I make a motion to approve. If anybody else doesn't have any changes.
Elizabeth makes a motion. Do we have a second?
This
Second.
is Adrian. I second.
Sorry, sister, and I got a couple. I see Omar on the big screen, so I'll go with Omar first then.
That's fine.
All right. Okay, any comments? Anybody like to discuss anything on the minutes? Okay, so we all in favor of approving the minutes? Say aye.
Yes.
Aye.
Aye.
Anybody against? Motion passes to approve the minutes. Okay. All right, always be wary of the citizens' comments. Citizens are required to fill a witness card out and submit them if there's any comments for this particular meeting. I don't believe we have any right now, so. But that's always an option, so being an awareness to that, so. Thank you. I guess we'll go with the staff report.
All right, Mr. Chairman. So if you go back, you look at the first report, it's the employment, deployment report that we furbish every month. Obviously still painting the picture of what the country's going through, less travel. We have seen some positive effects though lately. We have American and United adding service back. So it's one of those balancing acts that myself, Elsie, Alejandro have to do versus, you know, the pandemic, what's happening, and then also keeping people moving, keeping travel happening. But happy to report that we do see some traffic at least returning, not to, you know, pre-COVID levels just yet, but at least we're seeing more frequency pop up, especially with American, and Allegiant has been running its twice weekly service. So hopefully the numbers will continue to improve as we move into the fall and people feel more comfortable traveling. If you've seen our social media lately, we've really been trying to balance we're here for you when you think it's safe to travel. And that's really been the message that we've been sending out. So I think that we've seen some better resiliency than other airports, but, you know, by comparison, you know, to last year, TSA was doing, you know, roughly 2 million passengers a day. And now on a good day, it's up 400,000 to 500,000. So there's still a significant dip in travel. If you go to the next page, the gross landing rate report, once again, you'll see a significant drop. This all goes hand in hand with what we're seeing in the current environment. We have seen some positive signs with some of the plants reopening, some of our normal flights to up north coming back, you know, the Toledos and the Willow Runs of the world. So we have seen some cargo start to come back in, which is always positive, but obviously it's something we're tracking, I think, with USMCA. Hopefully that gets some people some confidence. And then if we can get, you know, some of these, there's not the restrictions for the air travel to Mexico, it's the land travel. So it's just, once again, getting people back into the factories, getting people back into traveling, and it still paints that picture. But, you know, we're working with our partners out there to try to look towards avenues for cargo development. I know, Mr. Chairman, you met with our consultants that just came down. So we're looking at this, we're tracking it, and hopefully the same as with the industry, we'll start to see things return to some normalcy. On the FIS, on the next, you'll see the same significant dip in travel. I think one of the bright spots with GA, though, is there's been a trend for people to push towards that for safety and to travel in general aviation versus commercial. So hopefully we'll see some uptick here as well as people start to get back into the air and feel comfortable. Same with the FIS, same tracking of what we see down in activity, all really related to COVID. And the same with the FIS operations, you know, significant drops, pretty standard to what we're seeing across the country. On the fuel flow report, obviously that goes hand in hand with less aircraft activity, less fuel flowage, and that's represented here. We do know that Signature was able to do some of the loan, personal protection, and employee loan benefits, so they brought their staff back. And with our airlines coming in now, like Allegiant twice a week, that's more fuel flowage. So hopefully we'll see this slowly improve. The ratios haven't changed much as far as who's doing the fueling notes, predominantly Signature. That stayed consistent even though the activity's lower. On the last page, the delinquent report, you'll see it is growing. I don't think that that's necessarily a surprise. You will see on the comment section, the economic relief that the advisory board had passed and city council. There have been some companies that have started to apply for it. You'll see on the right side there. Obviously, Hertz has filed for bankruptcy, so there are some things that we're working through with legal, but the delinquent report, as it is growing, I don't think it's necessarily significant to what we bring in monthly. If you want to talk briefly about that, Elsie.
Yeah, some of the, we've been working with all of our tenants, both the terminal, the FBOs, and even outside of the fence line. Everyone's being affected in different ways. I will tell you that a lot of them are mostly asking for the section of the program that applies to extension of the lease agreement. There were, some of them had options to go up to 12 months or 24 months, and a lot of them So far, we have around 29, and you're gonna see that as a motion here, coming forward. But they're all depending on the type of business, they're requesting the different types of options we have available for them.
And we actually have all the experts in the room today for phase 13 construction update. Alejandro, if you wanna, welcome back, sir.
Mr. Chairman, the project, the air cargo, the cargo air for phase 13 is, schedule is about 50%. And believe it or not, we're gonna finish before the contract time. So we're doing good on the project. So everything is status, normal. The contractor is doing good.
So you don't have any unexpected delays because of the situation that's going on, or?
No, believe it or not, we're pouring 3 times a week concrete, because on the outside, they're not doing a lot of construction. So that's why we're getting more concrete. We're getting 3/4 a week, and that's helping us to keep the schedule. And it looks like that we're going to finish ahead of schedule. I mean, the project contract time is about March 2021. So probably we're gonna finish before that. Well, hopefully, we'll see.
And because there's reduced flights, it allows you to work more time from
Yeah.
over there.
Yeah, so right now we're doing okay. We're doing fine. Hopefully we'll continue that trend, and we'll keep you reporting good news.
Thank you.
So the next thing we wanted to talk about here briefly was the terminal improvement program. We do have RS&H here, Amanda's here, and what we want to do is put a presentation up onto the screen for everybody to kind of walk through, see what it looks like. RS&H is our engineering consultant, among many other things. They are the ones that are working on the current construction project on the west side of the airfield. So they're here working with Alejandro, Elsie, and myself frequently. And we had a kickoff meeting, just a high level, a few weeks back on this project, and really an introduction here of what we're doing, why we're doing it, and an opportunity for everyone to ask questions and get involved at this point. So if it's okay, we'll start with the presentation here and work through it. And for those of you on the phone that aren't able to look, I know, Tom, you're one, and I had asked Amanda if she can, you probably already did it, I apologize if it's already in my email. The completed final version, we'll email it to everyone. So if you can't follow along right now on the web, we'll email it to you.
Thanks, Jeff.
Yep.
All right, well, thanks very much. Good afternoon. Really excited to be able to help the airport.
And just one step, can everyone on the line hear Amanda?
No,
No. Yes.
Why don't we get the phone a little bit?
Amanda, you want to try sitting here and just running it from the spot?
thank you.
I realized earlier when we were in the same room, it's difficult for me to project my voice through a mask. So I apologize for that. Ashley, next slide, please. So quickly, Jeff, I'm not sure how much time you wanted me to spend on this.
Well, this is really, we talked obviously to the chairman and the vice chair, but it's really an opportunity for everybody to get that. What are we actually doing?
Exactly.
So I would say, roll through a few kind of questions we have,
Okay.
but please take the time to explain what the project is and what we're trying to do.
Perfect. Okay. First of all, we're really excited for the airport to be able to have this project. We recognize that the ability to be able to do this and have it be something that the community is going to be able to see and use. No offense to John's Cargo apron ramp, but to be able to see improvements that come into a terminal building is pretty exciting. And so we love to be able to help our clients with that. RS&H takes care of a lot of design remodels and whole new terminal buildings for a lot of small and non-hub airports. And we love being able to help them and get involved with the community and really kind of give it the look, touch, and feel of what it is that your community is all about. So this particular project, it really has 2 major components to it. It's the planning and programming, which I'll spend some time discussing. And then the second big piece is actually designed for renovations of all of the restrooms in the terminal building. Within the planning and programming component, we're going to take a look at a whole bunch of other pieces of the terminal building. It'll include the checkpoint, which is why we're glad that the TSA is able to join us here today. Thank you very much for that. And then the restrooms, of course, and the concessions. So, and then we'll also talk a little bit about the anticipated timeline. Next slide, please. There you go. Okay. So, yes, two big components. So the first thing under the planning and programming that we're going to do, for those of you that don't know RSNH, we are, besides just aviation, we're a full service aviation consultancy. So they mentioned the cargo apron, the physical pavement design. We have engineers. I'm actually on the airport planning side. We have environmental planners and environmental scientists and resiliency and sustainability folks. And then we have a big practice of terminal architects. And so they handle everything from arch buildings and terminals and you name it. So that's what we're able to do within the scope of this project is have planners like myself, and also on the line is Monica Miller. She's an architect. She's based out of our Chicago office, but she works from home in Madison, Wisconsin. And unfortunately, she wasn't able to be here with us today. She'll be one of the lead architects on this project. But we're able to collaborate and really work well together and look at it from a planning perspective and dive deep into the terminal and architecture piece all at the same time. So from a planning perspective, we're going to take a look at how big are your restrooms? How much space do you have in the checkpoint? What's your concession space like? And kind of take a look at it through the lens of, if COVID didn't happen, where would we be from a passenger count perspective compared to where we really are today? And then we're going to take a look at what does the airport's master plan, this modernization program, show that the forecast is like for future activity. Because I kind of equate this to if a young couple is going to buy a house and it has 1 or 2 bedrooms, and they think in 3 to 5 years we're going to have a child and we're going to move into a bigger house, what happens if they have triplets their first year of marriage? All of a sudden, they're trying to figure out, how do we get into this bigger house? So we like to be able to look into the future a little bit at what that passenger activity is going to be like and right-size everything. Because everything changes based on the number of passengers, the number of gates. Everybody here in this room knows that. But what we're going to do is take a look at that and make sure that what we move forward with in this improvement program really is going to meet the real future demand for the airport. We're going to dive deep into the existing documents. Thank you, Alejandro. Monica, if you can see the rolls of paper there, Alejandro asked for some of my blood to bring them back safe and sound, but we have a lot of the drawings that you are in need of. So that's exciting. Go through existing documents, look at the code and the permitting requirements, and then we go into the facility requirements. Okay, what is it we really are going to need to meet this future demand? There is a piece associated with this for environmental review. Because the airport operates under federal guidelines, we need to make sure that any of the federal guidelines for environmental compliance are also followed. So we'll include a categorical exclusion. And then the fun part's going to be this preliminary concept study, where within the confines of this planning and programming piece, we're going to take a look at different ideas. There's lots of different ways to make this happen. And then finally, of course, no plans or aren't going to be able to move forward if we don't have proper cost estimates and go through the funding analysis to make sure that we have the right buckets of money to make everything happen. Next slide, please. Any questions so far? Okay. And on the phone, you can still hear me okay, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, yes. So
Yes.
within the one of the pieces of the planning and programming support is this concept report. So checkpoints, the restrooms, building systems, HVAC, electrical, utilities, plumbing, the PA system is something we know that needs some attention, as well as concessions. So take, for example, if we're going to move the security checkpoint from its current location, as it's shown in the master plan, up to the northern end of the building, we now have this space that we get to figure out what to do with. What's the highest and best use for that space? Is it more restrooms? Is it more concessions? What's going to be the best use for that? And it's the same really for any of these other components as well. Before we get in there and do the actual renovation of the restrooms, Mr. Miller wants to make sure that we build them the best restrooms that anybody can possibly think of. Yes.
Bathrooms are important.
Bathrooms are important. We know that as close to full doors are our preference. But there's some things, because Monica is an architect, and because she does airport terminal buildings, and that's what we do, we know what the restrictions are that come with that. So the restrooms may need a little bit of a bigger footprint. Where are we gonna take some of that space from? We don't know yet. So that's part of what this whole planning and programming piece is all about. Concessions is obviously a great way to generate revenue. What's the right balance between airside and landside? You know, you've got a captive audience when people are on the other side of the checkpoint, but because people that travel out of Laredo on a frequent basis know that they have the luxury and the benefits of being able to understand that if I get to the airport 45 minutes beforehand, I'm not gonna miss my flight. But if you get there 45 minutes before you leave, you're not gonna have time for a great sit-down meal either. So we need to figure out what's the right balance of where we put the concessions so that the airport and the city's revenues are maximized. So that's all part of this planning and programming piece, linking together the right space and the right footprint for everything as we pull together all these, the pieces of the puzzle. Jeff, is there anything in particular that
No, I think that really touches on it. What I wanted to just talk about too was, you know, everybody on the phone is aware that, you know, the airport received $18.5 million in CARES Act funding, which, you know, through the work with Elsie and Alejandro and the team with RSH, you know, it's something, when you look at it, we received more money than Corpus Christi, McAllen, and Brownsville combined. So that gives us an opportunity not only to help with what we did, like I said before in our last meeting with the tenants here in the deferral program and the adding to their lease with the current term, which we've heard very positive things on, and thank you for that, because I think, you know, that has made some of the burden here easier. But really what we want to focus with here is RSNH being the main, but local labor, local architects, local surveyors, putting this money back out into the Laredo economy, getting a public work project that's moving to Amanda's point that people can see, touch, feel. And, you know, right now, when you look at our terminal, everybody knows, you know, the bathrooms are not great. The checkpoint doesn't work for, especially an Allegiant type flight. It's a pre 9/11 checkpoint in a post 9/11 world. So we know there's safety concerns there. And I really think this gives us, all of us, an opportunity to put an investment back in that people in Laredo can see, touch, and feel. But the important thing to think as we work through this with the finance is 100% federal funding. And that's a really important part here. You know, these are guaranteed to us. So important to keep a part of. And thank you for, you know, really the leadership that you guys have given us so far has brought us to this point where we can start talking about these items. We went to Washington, D.C. back in March, and it was, I don't want to say a pipe dream, but it was a stretch to try to get something to move the checkpoint. And so, you know, as we look at the coronavirus, as we work to try to build back up in our community, I think this is a perfect opportunity for all of us to do that. Absolutely.
Ashley, next slide, please. So just as Jeff mentioned, stakeholder engagement, because all of that's gonna lead us into the preferred concept that is really gonna make this be what it is that you guys all, your tenants, your users and your stakeholders all really wanna make sure that this is the perfect program for moving forward. Okay, next slide, please. Don't know that it will look exactly like this, but we have a talented architect that is known for doing some of his conceptual drawings, and so this is one of the things that we thought would be neat to sort of display. We'll see how it eventually turns out. Still more to come, but anyway, you can see from this image here the existing terminal. The roof line goes all the way across the roadway, and then the expansion would be that area that just comes off closest to it, which is actually the north side of the terminal building. And so it is anticipated that that's where, according to the master plan, where the relocation of the checkpoint will lead, obviously second story construction only. And then it also will provide a nice open feel to it. And then like we've mentioned, provide a little bit of additional options, so actually lots of options for the reuse of the space that is vacated by the checkpoint. Next slide, please. So for those of you that are familiar, of course, we've got the existing terminal here. This kind of goes back still within the planning and programming piece of how we want to best serve the public and what makes the best sense for the highest and best use for all the space that becomes available to us. Looking, of course, both landside and airside areas will be considered. And then another component of that is, of course, the security checkpoint. It's a major priority. We realize that there's the safety concerns with it, undersized compared to pre-COVID or not, compared to passenger demand. It's just not necessarily ideal. And then the safety concerns, of course, during queuing, and there could also be some valuable real estate as well. Next slide, please. So this is one potential idea. Again, just a rendering of something that what it would look like if that northern wall were to be bumped out and extended, and it still carries through the curved roof line. Again, you know, these are all the pieces that we look at when we go into the planning and programming, so that we can see what are the nice to haves, what are the must haves, what are the wants, and then we compare that to the various cost estimates, so that the overall preferred concept really matches what it is that the airport and the city wants to be able to take to move forward, and of course with collaboration with the stakeholders as well. But being north of the terminal building, of course, second level expansion, multiple screening lanes. This is where, of course, TSA comes into play, because we recognize that it's great to say you have all this space. You're going to be limited by equipment that you have or that you'll be able to get, limited by staffing. So all of those things we recognize are things that that we need to consider as well. And then also take into consideration what social distancing might look like. So I think I may have had a little note in here to show another video, but we're not running this off of my machine. But one of the things that RSNH has been actively involved with has been modeling the passenger footprint activity in terminal buildings, putting social distancing into place. So a couple of airports, Grand Rapids, Palm Beach, are some of them that I know we've already taken a model of a terminal building, and you have a bubble that represents a human. And what does that look like if you have to keep 6 feet of a bubble around them at the ticket counter and at the security checkpoint? And how does that impact the rest of the space that goes out from it? So those are some of the things that we'll need to take into consideration, of course. Hopefully all of this comes back to whatever our new normal is at some point in time, but that doesn't mean that people just won't maybe have a new, you know, I need my space. Who knows? Who knows? Yet to be seen for us. So, okay, next slide, please, Ashley. So this is just what can we do with this amount of space? And because we look at an airport of this size with this amount of activity and this number of gates, and the schedule, of course, TSA knows, plays a big part into what's the peaking activity like for the checkbook. If we had this amount of space, what could we do with it? One of the things that we want to make sure to consider, and again, please just think of this as how much space could be occupied there, not even in these particular locations. If we have an opportunity for a public gathering community space, maybe, I think ideally on the other side of the checkpoint, on the unsecure side of the checkpoint, so that people can see their family and friends off, and then maybe be able to have a nice view out of the terminal building. Who knows, right? Who knows? These are still, you guys can't see me smiling, you're laughing. Again, oh, this is driving me crazy.
You're right.
Okay. I know. So, you know, so that's kind of the fun part of being able to figure out what makes sense and what do we really want to preserve room for. But there's a few other things that have kind of come in, as Jeff mentioned, a pre-9/11 checkpoint from the post-9/11 world. We now have considerations for mothers' rooms and pet relief areas even. And so there might be an opportunity to look at the repurposing and the space utilization of what it is that we do with that new space and with the repurposing of the older, the previous checkpoint space. Next slide, please. Just wanted to put this in here that this is actually consistent with, I've mentioned it briefly, with the airport's modernization plan, that the security screening checkpoint was, when they went through that study a few years ago, it was with the intent of an eventual larger gate expansion program. And so we wanted to make sure that we are responsible in looking at that alternative as the first one moving forward. So we don't have any reason to believe that that's not what we're going to do. And that's kind of what the lines that we're thinking, but it does indeed allow for incremental expansion later on down the road. So even though we're not thinking about any extra gates at this time, we want to make sure that we think about what would it look like if we do that, so that when the airport does it, that it is an easy transition for future implementation, demand, and growth later on down the road. Next slide, please. Restroom renovation. So just wanted to kind of give you a sense of the restrooms that we would take a look at. I believe, Monica, there's actually 6 restrooms that are being considered, and we only show 4 here, correct? Sorry to put you on the spot.
That's okay, we have the FIS.
Okay.
So, but basically what it would be is a modernization of all the bathrooms here. It's one of our biggest complaints today from passengers. They're not well lit, they don't, the paper towels, the hand washing, everything in there is just 20 years old. So, to Amanda's point as well, this gives us an opportunity to look at some of that pandemic technology that, will help us down the road, whether that's, better units for washing hands, more privacy in the bathroom, better lit, a modernized feel. So that, I think, is a big component to us being successful, and it leaves a lasting impression when people use our facilities, and especially when you look at a smaller airport our size. That's where we can kind of really get into these niche environments that, what do we do with the concessions? Because as we're working on this in conjunction where you're working in an RFP for extra concessions at the terminal, right now when you fly out of here, the bathroom experience isn't great. The checkpoint works to an extent, but not really if you're on, a larger flight, and you can't even get a cup of coffee in the morning when you're getting on a flight. So all of this is working together to make that experience better for the person that's coming through Laredo and gets them to the point to say, oh, I would rather fly. Because one of the interesting parts that we're seeing now, we just released a survey at the beginning of the week. More people in Laredo are saying they want to fly out of Laredo than maybe driving to San Antonio because of the pandemic, because they want to fly locally. So we could, as Amanda said, we don't know where this necessarily ends up once we're out of COVID, but it's an opportunity that we want to set ourselves up to be successful.
And Jeff, regarding the survey, now that you discussed it, we'll be sharing that link to the survey with all of our board members today. Please take a look at it, share it with your coworkers or business partners, please, and we can get a best result.
I was gonna ask her, because I know that a lot of that was already disseminated to a lot of the trade members.
Yes.
And, has the response been overwhelming, or have you?
Not too much. No, not yet. We just put it up, over the
Yeah,
weekend.
it's on Monday. We're not
Yeah.
Monday, I believe.
Yeah, we just put it up. We have about 100, Yeah, the more, the better the analysis that we can make. Thank you, sorry.
Oh, no, you're fine. I think next slide, please, Ashley. Just some ideas, mentioned a little bit about mother's rooms, family restrooms with adult changing stations, whether or not that becomes an issue and something that we want to incorporate, but this is the perfect time to have that discussion. Animal relief room, we've actually done a few different projects at airports of those, and I tried to get those photos added in here. I'm not sure where that one is, but I know we've done several of them.
And I think that's important too, because some of these are the right thing to do, and especially with the animal relief, it's required. We're required by the DOT to have a relief area in the sterile area for service animals. So it is something that right now Elsie and myself have been working, something that, a tear sheet in the bathroom. But if you look at our space, we have a nursing station today, but we're kind of plugging and placing it in a very vast open area. The bones of the terminal are great. It's a great terminal. It's just the inside that sense of place that I think we're missing right now.
Next slide, please. I think we're nearing the end. Oh, anticipated timeline. There we go. So we actually had, as Jeff mentioned at the beginning, we actually had an internal kickoff meeting about the middle of June. Here we are today going through this presentation, but we're also here to talk about existing conditions, and that's why we're thankful that the TSA was able to join us for a follow-on meeting. As you can see, we'll continue to have meetings about every 2 to 3 weeks. And this is a really nice quick burn of a project. We have the two components, the overall report, the planning and programming piece, and then the restroom design. So we're going to do everything we can to get the restroom design lined up while we're working on the planning and programming report. And then as quickly as we can go punch on the restroom design, it's anticipated that'll be finished Thanksgiving, before Christmas, early December timeframe. So we'll be able to turn that around really nice and quickly and be able to start, get that out for bid and get that thing going nice and quickly. So, and then any of the pieces that come in under the planning and programming, the checkpoint, the concessions, And all those other components will then be a subsequent phase to this current project. That's close to the end. I believe there's another, yep, that is it.
So we're in the question and answer phase. Anybody that may have questions over the presentation and where we're going and.
You already have the funding, so that's really good. I feel like a really good project, really impressive. I know that one thing that personally is lacking is a lot of people fly out on business and there's missing concessions, especially on the opposite side after the checkpoint, the TSA clearance. You know, so they could go out there buy gifts for whoever. And
oh, especially nowadays, because even with our American and United flights, you're not getting a drink on those flights right now.
Yeah.
You know, they stopped all that service. So if you're not here and you don't happen to have a fistful of quarters or some really good ones that they go into that machine, you're not getting any kind of service there. So yeah, we filter those complaints, you know, and it's hard, it's tough. I mean, but like I said, in conjunction with this, Elsie and I have been having conversations about the concessions, and I think complementing with this, we're lining it up hopefully here within the next week, to a week and a half, 2 weeks, to put out another RFP for concessions and have that out on the street to work in unison with what we're doing here, but to get something in here sooner than later. And then as we look over the 2 years, as we move those spaces around, what does that look like permanent?
well, I'm also even talking about gift stuff, you know, like
Oh, yeah.
in Laredo, because there's nothing there.
No, there's nothing. Yeah, it's not. It's a very, as a passenger leaving out of here, especially if you go into a delay, 3 hours, you could be out there with nothing. And it's not a lasting impression that you want for your airport. So I think this leads us in that direction to give us some better service for sure. Were there other questions? So, well, thank you, Amanda. And Amanda will still be here too, if something should pop up.
You know, it's clear on the staff report, I think this is the last one, right?
Yes, yeah.
I saw the cargo activity is pretty, I mean, last month we had 0
Yeah.
and then we had 1 this month, so.
Yeah, it's, you know, it's one of those things, especially here in Laredo, that and that's part of the consultants, it's a very heavy auto manufacturing airport. So when we don't have auto manufacturing, we lose all those Toledos, Willow ones, all those types of activities to those airports. So we have hired a consultant, Hub Point, which I know, Mr. Chairman, you met with. They came down here and met with 13 stakeholders, 16 stakeholders, to look at certain avenues of what we can do to increase our cargo service. So the same as we do with air service development, we've partnered with another team to help us look for avenues to improve that, along with the conversation of trying to expand with Mexico Customs. But we just learned again that there's more changes in the Mexican government leadership. So still ongoing with that project.
Okay, you know what, I was on a call this morning, it brought to my attention, it's kind of interesting in reference to the cargo that, you know, a lot of times you have merchandise that flies 4 hours and then they have a rush, but then it has to stay 4 or 8 hours, even a day or two, and especially dealing with PPPs here at the border.
Yeah.
Or, you know, not even at the border, at the larger airports.
Sure.
I know Laredo, we don't have that much of a delay, but their concern is why and how can we expedite some of that process? Because if they're gonna pay premium to get it going, and then they have to stop and then go through the process to do what they have to do,
Right.
How can they expedite that process as well?
Well, I think we're working on it towards multiple angles right now. We're trying to focus down to see what other cargo activity may be out there as logistical change within China and what's happened within the Asian countries. But we also have our land use our RFP that we just left the meeting this morning. We're having a very robust response to, which would be private investment into the west side of the airport, those open green spaces predominantly as they exist today. And I think those things can work hand in hand when we start looking at potentially more avenues for cargo and cargo operators and better facilities for them. Because the good and the bad news today is, good news is the flight line is full. I have nothing to lease anybody on the flight line. The bad news is I have nothing to lease anybody on the flight line. So when you start talking about logistical changes, that's where it gets difficult. But what our intention, what our plan is to work not only with the Mexican government, but also with our private cargo users here as well to show that people would use that route. And I think that's where it gets to the point with the Mexican government that they're looking towards easing some of those restrictions that we see on it today. But yeah, if we can, use that process to stop the bonded warehousing in Mexico, that sets us apart from other airports and things they can't do. So we're trying to layer that together, not only with this project on the east side to work towards the air service, but the cargo service and all kind of unison together. So we're definitely not unfocusing on one part of it. We're trying to say, okay, what makes sense for us and how can we layer this together to potentially put investment into property through a development? And what does that look like? A distribution center for cargo? Does that look towards e-commerce? We know e-commerce in Mexico is 2% of what it could be today. If you're a Prime member in Mexico City, you're not getting your stuff in 2 days. You're getting it in 2 weeks. So if we can open up some logistical change there, that's where I think it starts to get exciting. And with what we've done here with the team, and as we move forward, that RFP set to close in August. I'm hoping that at that point, we have some really good activity and investment to look at on the west side of the airport, and then kind of move forward from there.
I guess, moving on, I guess we can turn it introductory ordinances.
Yes, yes. So this is to consider recommendation to the mayor and city council to authorize the city manager to execute a lease agreement between the city of Laredo as the lessor and the General Services Administration, GSA, as the lessee for approximately 1,533 square feet, constituting office space occupied by the Transportation Security Administration, TSA, located at 5210 Bob Bullock Loop at the Laredo International Airport. The monthly rent shall be $5,327.18 and will be adjusted annually according to changes in the Consumer Price Index. The term shall be for 3 years commencing on November 18th, 2020 and ending November 17th, 2023. So these are the office spaces for TSA. And if you look at the timeline, it lines up to where we would look towards occupancy towards the north end of the terminal. So we're talking about a 2-year project to finish the terminal improvement program. So this would line us up at that point to look at renting that new office space that we would create to the north side for them.
Anybody have any discussion on
Staff
this?
is recommending I make a motion to approve.
Yes, we recommend.
Mm-hmm.
Elizabeth makes a motion. We have a second.
Second.
Good. Okay. All in favor? Say aye.
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 Everybody good? Okay. Motion passes.
Okay, so the next is consider recommendation to mayor and city council to authorize the city manager to execute an amendment to the lease agreement between the city of Laredo as the lessor and the Laredo Aero Center, Inc., DBA, Signature Flight Support as lessee, to amend section 1.05 titled term of leasehold by adding to the current lease and term of May 31st, 2021, 2 options to extend the lease until May 31st, 2026, and until June 30th, 2030. And to amend section 1.06 rental obligation and mode of payment by adding adjustment of rental value based on appraised fair market value of the leased premise on anniversary date in 2021 and 2026 in support of the existing fixed base operator license and match the license term ending date. All other terms and conditions remain unchanged and in effect. This goes back to what Elsie was talking about earlier with the rent deferral program that was approved by the advisory board 2 months ago. This is Signature applying to that program and the same terms that we had in that, extending the end of their lease to recuperate, offset some of the losses that they've seen over the last 4 to now moving into 5 months. Elsie, I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that.
We recommend approval.
And we recommend approval.
Just to
This is for the fuel farm. Sorry, I just wanted to mention for those.
Oh, this is
in front of it.
Okay.
So the premises will be for the storage and dispensing of aviation fuel for the aircraft.
Fuel farm, yeah. So this is the fuel farm where they would lease off the fuel farm property itself.
discussion, or anybody would like to make a motion?
Motion to approve.
Today.
Second.
I'm sorry, who was the first one? That's Tom or?
I think it was just.
No, it
Good.
was.
Yeah. Good. Good?
Yes,
What makes the
yes, those
motion?
meetings.
Elizabeth makes the second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Anybody against? Motion passed.
So number 3 is to consider a recommendation to mayor and city council for establishing and creating policy and procedures granting authority to the airport director to execute lease agreements and or amendments with interested parties for the use of airport property and facilities located at the Laredo International Airport and establishing a quarterly update to mayor and city council for ratification of lease agreements and or amendments through an ordinance. So where we started to have this conversation, Christina Hale is, the new oversees the airport among others. She's still currently acting as a city attorney. So when we sat down and started having a conversation, as everybody on the board, I'm sure is fully aware, because we've had these conversations of losing potentially the ability to rent facilities just for as long as it takes for us to work through the city process to lease a facility. It can take sometimes up to 6 months, which everybody knows is ridiculous when we start talking about trying to put people into units. So this gives me the flexibility to start working with people that come in to look at our properties without having to go through all the motions to get to the point where we could finally lease it and potentially lose that investment over 5 to 6 months. Obviously, we follow with everything with the FAA, fair market value. So I think this gives us the latitude and the ability to help ease some of the burden that we have as an organization and get people into these buildings. And it is an industry trend. Most airport directors have the ability to do this, to carry this out. And there was a recommendation, obviously, by staff and with our city attorney / assistant city manager.
That's because of this time frame that we're going through right now.
Yeah, it just, it's even, not in the COVID world, it takes so long for us to get something leased because there's so many processes that we have to go through just to get something out there for someone to bring in. And, the way business works today, nobody wants to hear, I'll move in 6 months. And so we end up losing a lot of investment.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question.
Yes.
Yes, the item is establishing and creating policies and procedures. Will you all be working on that and bringing it back to the airport and then to the city council, or how? Or do you have a policies and procedures already?
No, it'll be working with our legal department. So it will double check with Ms. Christina Hell on the rules for that. If it needs to take it back to city council, I believe it would, but we'll get final confirmation from legal department on that end.
And we'll bring it through this advisory board too. This will start the conversation for us, but we'll bring back those rules so you can look at them before we move forward with them.
Okay.
Motion for this?
Motion to approve.
One more?
Second.
This is the second. Any additional discussion? Any discussion on this? Motion, all in favor say aye.
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 Yes?
Aye.
Motion passed.
Mr. Chairman, number 4, authorizing the city manager to execute amendments on applicable lease agreements approved under the Economic Relief Program for current tenants at the Laredo International Airport. The term on lease agreements will be amended according to guidelines established on the Economic Relief Program approved by City Council on May 18, 2020. All other terms and conditions remain unchanged and in effect. So what this allows us to do, it goes back once again to that economic relief package that we did, where it's a rent deferral and then adding that extension of time on the end of their lease at the current terms. It doesn't change any of the other terms of the contract besides extending the lease to a certain amount of period at the end of it to give that entity the opportunity to recuperate the losses that they've had during COVID. So This is just giving us that ability to adjust those leases to add those times in for the people that do apply to the rent deferral program. And staff recommends.
Do we have a motion on this?
Yeah.
This is Adrian, I approve.
Second.
Adrian, motion, and George, second.
Correct.
Any discussion on this?
No, I think this is piggybacking the same resolution we had last meeting.
Yes, it is. Correct, George.
Basically, it's just carbon copy of that, and now we're making a motion.
Good point there, George. All right, all in favor, say aye.
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 Motion passed.
We're moving to resolution number 5. Consider a recommendation to the mayor and city council to authorize the city manager to submit a grant application, if offered, to execute grant agreement with the Texas Department of Transportation Aviation Division under the Routine Airport Maintenance Program and the amount of $50,000 for the purpose of airside and landside maintenance at the Laredo International Airport, and authorizing the city manager to execute all necessary documents resulting from the award. The local match in the amount of $50,000 for the project is available in the Airport Operations Fund. Total estimate project is $100,000. As everybody knows, this is our yearly $50,000 grant from the Texas Department of Transportation. In the state of Texas, this is really all a commercial service airport is eligible for. As you know, we get the majority of our funding from the FAA, but we get this, we put this into the airfield and we match it with $50,000. It's a yearly grant that we receive from TxDOT, and the airport staff approves.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Elizabeth, no more? Elizabeth, motion? One more second. Any additional discussion, any discussion on the matter? All in favor, say aye.
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 Anybody against? Motion passed? Okay, so, I guess this time frame is for any additional requests. I know that we're doing through some unique time frames. Anybody have any additional requests that they'd like to move forward, or any additional comments? I'd like to thank our guests for being here. I know everybody during unique time frames. I'd like to appreciate the fact we have all our guests that were able to make this meeting. So.
If I could just make one more point, Mr. Chairman. And I don't think it's public knowledge right now. This is a public meeting, so I'll leave that up to the chairman afterwards to discuss. But we have some really exciting news that I just heard from city management. There will be a press release next week with the congressman. Unfortunately, because it's a public meeting, I don't want to discuss much further. And unfortunately, we won't be able to do a huge thing here at the airport. We're going to do something at City Hall. It's going to be very limited. I was instructed at this point, probably only myself and the chairman to attend. So I just wanted to let everybody know, just because of what's happening with COVID. But it's really good news for all of us. And, I'd be more than happy to speak offline about it, so I don't step on any official press announcements. But we do have some exciting news coming from the federal government. So.
You don't have any cameras.
Yeah, right, exactly.
But we don't have anything else to discuss. I know LTC's making a comment on setting up the link so we can find out the survey.
Yeah, the survey, we have it in our Facebook and social media. It's already posted. It's in the process of getting updated on our website. It just came up. But we'll be sending the link to all of our board members as well. Like I said, I encourage you and hope that you would fill it out and send it to your friends or business partners so they can also look into it and see if they can help us with some answers and better help us analyze the passenger trends.
I see some of the trade stakeholders discriminating. It's interesting. It's a good little quick survey, so I encourage everybody to fill it out.
Thank you, JD. Yes, it's very short. It's only like 9 questions. It'll take you like 2 minutes or less. It's very quick.
I filled it out already. I received something.
Great.
Yeah, so I'm going to share it with our realtors and everybody else.
I assume you said you were getting on a plane tomorrow. You're ready to travel.
Well, is there nothing else to discuss? I guess I'm looking for a motion to dismiss. Anybody?
Motion.
Isabel?
Second,
Mr. Never.
George.
George.
George is second, yes.
yes.
Okay. Motion,
Martinez, second.
I guess, we're doing some time, so thank you, I appreciate everybody attending the meeting, so, thank you.
Stay safe.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everybody. Thank you.
Have a nice day.
Thank you.
Good day.